Anarchy, BDSM, and Consent-Based Culture by Hexe, from the book Queering Anarchism by C.B. Deric, J. Rogue, Deric Shannon, and Abbey Volcano. This text retrieved from theanarchistlibrary.org. I want to talk about anarchy, and I want to talk about BDSM and kinky sex. They are both incredibly controversial subjects. So let's start slowly, with some lube, as if we are going to attempt anal sex. Let's do some defining. Defining is great. It makes sense of previously confusing subjects. BDSM is an acronym that has several interpretations. Indeed, it is a compound acronym. It is derived from the terms bondage and discipline, B&D or BD, dominance and submission, DNS or DS, and sadism and masochism, S&M or SM. BDSM includes a wide spectrum of activities, interpersonal relationships, and distinct subcultures. Participants usually take on complementary but unequal roles within a BDSM context. The idea of consent of both of the partners becomes essential. Often participants who are active, applying the activity or exercising some form of control over others, are known as tops or dominants. Those participants who are recipients of the activities, or who are controlled by their partners, are typically known as bottoms or submissives. Individuals who assume either top/dominant or bottom/submissive roles, whether from relationship to relationship or within a specific relationship only, are known as switches. I should also mention that tops and dominants are different roles, and bottoms and submissives are also different roles. The differences are not immediately apparent to the outside observer, but very important to the people who identify with them. There are also people who enjoy aspects of BDSM that are not explicitly sexual. BDSM is based on sexual practices, but also incorporates our daily interactions and experiences with power. So that is the very, very tip of the iceberg. Inevitably, no matter what, someone somewhere will find offense with any definition and start a heated discussion about it. The diverse rainbow of anarchy, henceforth referred to as the anarchy bow, can be a confusing mess. It is comprised of bickering theorists, insurrectionists, primitivists, armchair radicals, and the occasional right-wing jerk, all struggling to be correct about the next tactic or developing analysis. There is often disagreement within the anarchy bow. This disagreement is particularly rabid due to a basic consensus. The anarchy bow disagrees with itself with the rabid intensity of people who share similar ethics, debating how to change the current world order from a hierarchy based on abuse and exploitation to a system without someone at the top of the oppression pyramid scheme, and without the entire pyramid scheme. What we want is a system that benefits everyone and eliminates prejudice and racism and the inequalities of capitalism. And then we'll all have our own unicorn to ride along shining streams, because you know you want your own unicorn to ride into battle against capitalism. In an attempt to simplify the anarchy bow, I have divined what is to me the first unwritten rule of anarchy. The first unwritten rule of anarchy is don't be a douchebag. All the fancy theories, all the discussion about tactics and support, and building a new world by tearing down the old and whatnot, all come down to the fact that in this world, people are often douchebags. They are douchebags to one another. They are douchebags to the planet. They are douchebags to animals. There are whole systems of indoctrination that teach us to be douchebags to one another from the time we are children. Many people have spent lots and lots of time explaining the ways that people are douchebags and how the structure of society teaches us to be douchebags. The goal of anarchy is to change that, not just a little, but entirely. All of our wonderful systems of organization and activism that work so well are often undermined by the brokenness of the system we were raised in. The way that even in a non-hierarchical organization, there are often people who call the shots, or the person who is always getting their way and not allowing others to speak. We are the result of hundreds of years of oppression, colonization, capitalism, genocide, racism, and sexism. We can't help but have internalized some of that, even if we are dedicated to changing the system. Often, this happens on the traditional lines of gender and race oppressions, but other times it is subtler. In attempting to dismantle a busted system, we all bring our own baggage and prejudices. What we can do is learn from it and work to make our practice of anarchy as equal as possible. Revolution is a funny word. It has been assigned to many things, and according to the cultural history of the United States of America, there has already been a sexual revolution. A lot of people in the last century did a lot of work around sexuality and freedom, and we are benefiting from it today. But there were radicals before the hippies who were doing and saying the same things about sexual freedom. The sexual revolution has been happening for a long time, and continues to do so. Some people even go so far as to say anarchy is love, which sounds like we're all a bunch of hippies with fancy analyses of politics and anti-oppression and whatnot. But I'm sure Emma Goldman had no fucking clue what a hippie was going to be, and she was all about love. Emma Goldman was a really huge badass. Sadly, there are no surviving pictures of her riding a unicorn. I believe there are hundreds of sexual revolutions happening every day. Every day people accept themselves and their sexuality and support one another to subvert the heterosexist idea that the only valid sexual relationships are between one man and one woman. The dominant narrative says they must both be cisgendered, having a match between the gender they were assigned at birth, their bodies, and their personal identity. This oppression hurts all of us. Sex can be very personally revolutionary. It can be healthy, and it can be a form of self-care, and it can be medicine, but only if it is done with full consent and participation of all parties. Historically, anarchists have been very vocal about supporting sexual freedom and queer rights. Emma Goldman spoke out against marriage and for the right of women to have access to birth control. Her lover and compatriot, Alexander Berkman, wrote about being queer and supporting queer rights. Anarchy has always been a little queer, and anarchists have always been nerds for sexual freedom and choice. Why not BDSM as well? You might have noticed I used the word queer in several different ways. Originally, queer was used to describe something odd or abnormal. It is also used in reference to a group of people. Traditionally, queers have been folk who engage in sexy times with people of a similar gender, transgender folk, and the word extends to include those who engage in relationships outside the heteronormative monogamous party line. The label queer was reclaimed from being a slur and insult. That's how tough we are. We can take language intended to hurt us and turn it into something completely different. The definition has fluctuated and is often in debate. To queer something, used as a verb, is to subvert it, change it subtly or radically, like we did with the use and definition of the word itself. The anarchy bow both loves and hates queerness. Like the anarchist community, again in the BDSM community, there's a problem of people coming to it as a sexual practice with the same amount of baggage as when people come to anarchy. I have sometimes heard people speak of their personal practice of BDSM as if it cures all things. In those experiences, I felt like I was witnessing a personal spiritual moment. I am not a proponent of choosing anything as your shining light, though as a human race, we have a tendency to do so. The mainstream BDSM community has been called out in many instances for sexism, heterosexism, racism, ableism, and not being accessible to people who are not middle class or financially liquid. Sexism, the act of gender discrimination, is a problem in almost every part of the society, and hence carries over into BDSM spaces. Heterosexism is interesting in the context of the current incarnation of the mainstream BDSM community, which often identifies itself as a pansexual, open to all sexualities and genders space. The history of BDSM in the United States comes directly from queer spaces, particularly the gay male leather and fisting community, quickly taking hold in lesbian spaces as well. At a certain point, some called BDSM the practice of radical sex. One thing the BDSM community adheres to with a passion is the idea of consensual power exchange. A scene can look non-consensual, can be playing with non-consent, but it is still just playing. One's experience with BDSM, like any sexual practice, is personal. For some, it's not something they will be interested in for various reasons. Some people just aren't wired kinky. Some people need time to work out their feelings about it. There's a lot of guilt around sexuality in general, and around non-normative sexuality specifically. It's a hard journey for a lot of us to a place where we are comfortable with all aspects of ourselves and our sexuality. Another thing folks have come up against is just plain bad experiences with BDSM. Maybe the person they played with was a jerk and didn't respect their boundaries. Maybe they had a bad experience with the community they joined to experience BDSM. Maybe they just felt alienated by some of the monetary barriers to the BDSM scene. Play parties cost a lot of money. Conventions cost hundreds of dollars. And that's before you add in lodging and food. Or perhaps the overwhelming lack of people of color in many kinky communities was a barrier. There is value in BDSM as a fun thing, as a human need, as a fulfilling practice, as a way to play with power, and just as a way to play as an adult. We can't take off our skin color or gender easily, or switch up our privileges at the drop of a hat in the real world, but we can play with power and control, or the lack of it in a BDSM scene. And it ends when you are done, not when the intersections of oppressions and privilege stop doing their various screwy things, because that might take a while. We are chipping steadily away at them, but the leviathan of inequality is massive. The ability to play with power can teach us new ways to understand how we have internalized different parts of the abusive dominant culture, and new ways to think about resistance. Doing anarchy might not include practicing BDSM, but doesn't exclude it either. BDSM and anarchy have more than their share of differences, but if anything, there is one fetish both anarchists and BDSM folks share, and that is a fetish for consent and organizing people. Both communities are consent-based cultures. Consent is the act of agreeing to an act, situation, or circumstance by various means, generally verbal or written. Occasionally, implied consent is used in medical situations, so caregivers can administer medical attention while someone is unconscious. However, administering a life-saving protocol and having sex with someone are two drastically different to fall under the same guidelines of consent. By consent-based cultures, I mean they talk about consent. They discuss ways to gain and give consent. As a community and as individuals, they write things about consent, what it means to them, and how to implement it. The dominant culture is terrible at consent. Capitalism doesn't ask you if you want to be exploited. Patriarchy doesn't ask you if you want to be considered a second-class citizen based on what's between your legs, or inversely, to be taught to be an oppressor based on what's between your legs. We are all constantly learning how to give and obtain consent, and not everyone is good at it, yet. Everyone has a story about a creepy anarchist, or a messed up kinky person not respecting folks. Through applying active principles of consent to our lives and our sex lives, and taking that into every relationship we have, sexual and non-sexual, more and more people will be able to use those skills, and we will always be improving our own use of consent as well. Everything and anything can be revolutionary. The most insignificant tool can begin an insurrection. Anything that is fulfilling, healthy, and doesn't harm anyone else can be medicine. As a community and as individuals, it is a revolutionary act to be dedicated to consent. Doing anarchy and doing BDSM are not things that intersect often, except in the lives of people who practice both. However, if there is something that both the anarchy bow and ethical BDSM practices can give to the struggle for a just society, it is the skill of active consent. And everyone gets a unicorn.